morning, church. I welcome you all in the name of Jesus Christ and in the name of First Congregational United Church of Christ. No matter who you are or where you find yourselves on life's journey, whether you're coming to us on Zoom or Facebook Live or YouTube Live, know that you are most welcome here. And as part of our practicing the presence of God at the start of worship, I want to share a reflection that Sheldon Hurst has made once again that kind of frames some things that may be happening in worship today. So Sheldon, of course, being the director of the Art Reach Gallery, has this beautiful part of what's on display is some beautiful, beautiful small prints by Pallavi Pandit. And Sheldon, just kind of take a look at these for a moment as I ring the bell, then I'll read what Sheldon has written about them. As we take a deep breath in, let it out slowly, clearing away whatever obstacles we may have brought with us to experiencing the presence of God in this time of worship. Sheldon writes concerning these prints: involution, evolution, devolution, revolution. If you have eyes to see, then see the blue becoming. No season stops for reasons incrustations. At the stations where people get off to play, just stop and see now. To know how blue is the hue that changes in exchanges with your time. Deep, dark, and high light metamorphose until more poses in the chiaroscuros of wonder. While standing on the landing, you find your mind is able to see those possibilities that are more than you thought possible. Claim the name of you. Then yes, your way to be. We. Amen. Amen. It's always interesting how many opening hymns in worship have to do with waking up. Keep awake, keep awake. Well, I hope we're all awake this morning. And before starting into our multi-generational reflection, I want to make it truly multi-generational and highlight a person who is on Zoom with us this morning, who has something very special to celebrate that maybe you don't know about. I want to highlight Frank Baldwin. Frank, everybody see Frank there? Hey, there he is. Frank is celebrating today his 50th anniversary of ordination into ministry. Congratulations, Frank. Woo. And we have a little something for you, Frank, to help you celebrate today. I don't know if Margaret is perhaps there. She is. She's bringing it in. And here, I'll unmute you there. There we go.
Thank you. Well, it says happy anniversary, Frank. This is what the cake says, but it's pretty unreadable. And here's Margaret's pulling it out. But look at this. Woo!
There we go. It's a chocolate raspberry cake to help you celebrate today.
Woo! Okay. Thank you very much.
Oh, pleasure. We have one other thing for you, too. Actually, it's not us. It's the president of our denomination, the United Church of Christ, John Dorhauer, has a special message for you, too, Frank, which I'll play right now.
Thank you, Margaret.
Hello, friends at First Congregational United Church of Christ in Portland. My name is John Dorhauer, and I am currently serving as the General Minister and President of the United Church of Christ. I bring you greetings, as well as to my dear friend, Eric Elnes, who is serving as your pastor. I understand that you have among your membership Reverend Frank Baldwin, and I understand that Margaret is the moderator of your church. Thank you, Margaret, for your service. But I want you to know that the entire United Church of Christ doesn't take lightly and celebrates the ministry of all of our authorized clergy. And when something like a 50th anniversary rolls around, we know that's a big deal. So I'm just calling to help you celebrate Frank Baldwin's 50th ordination anniversary, giving thanks for his time in service to the churches in San Lorenzo, California, Fresno, California, Orinda, California, and Wilsonville, Oregon. To all of our humble, faithful servants who give their lives in service and in ministry to the church, I give thanks. And today, especially for the Reverend Frank Baldwin. Thank you for your years of service. It matters, it's not forgotten, and I deeply appreciate all that you have done in your 50 years of ministry. Thank you.
Thank you, John.
Yay. So, Frank, we only have one question for you. After 50 years of ministry, what was Jesus really like?
He was unique. He was like all of us, but like none of us.
All right. Well, congratulations and thank you for your service to the Church of Jesus Christ and the world.
Thank you, Eric. Thank you, congregation.
Next week, we will be celebrating our graduates. We have some who have been who are graduating from high school and from college. So we'll be doing a little something special for them on next week, which is also Father's Day. So stay tuned. But for you kids who are present, and I think I saw Logan's on, and I'm not sure who else yet, but I want to actually show you a video that highlights something that's known as a supersaturated solution. Now, that's a big word, a supersaturated solution. I don't know, maybe if you've ever cooked something with your parents, but if you put salt in cold water, you can only put so much in before it doesn't dissolve anymore. The water can't hold any more salt. But if you heat that water up, you can actually put more salt in it, more and more salt in it. The hotter the water, the more of that salt it can hold. And then when the water cools down, you see those salt crystals appear again because the cooler water can't hold all that that salt in it. Now, there's reasons for that, but though that's way beyond my pay grade to describe and probably your pay grade to understand. But there are certain kinds of salts where when you heat up the water, you can put more and more and more in, but then when the water cools, those crystals that are trying to form, they can't form. And so the water becomes what they call supersaturated, like it has more salt in it than the water is supposed to have. And the crystals want to form, but they don't have the pattern. These particular salt crystals need the pattern to follow in order to become a crystal again. So check out what happens when this science teacher introduces the concept of supersaturated solutions in this video.
Okay. See one little crystal.
Zoom in, Rena.
I don't know how.
Go closer.
Hold on.
Just start.
You can't even see it.
Okay, go.
You can hardly see.
Okay, well there's a crystal
It's
on it.
right
It might
somewhere.
crystallize your
It's not going to crystallize on me.
on your phone.
Ready?
Yes.
So realize this has been sitting there all year long like this. Okay.
What is it?
I'm
What
gonna
is it?
change. Huh? Well, it's water that has a huge amount of these crystals dissolved in it.
Oh.
It has so much of it that is called supersaturated. It actually
we
is
just
holding
learned
more
about
salt than water actually can.
How does that work?
Because I boiled it.
You dropped it in there?
What?
Oh snap!
my gosh, that's so cool! It looks like a sea
It looks like a
Looks
puff
like a sea
ball.
urchin.
My finger ran out of.
Oh my god.
Oh my god.
That's so cool.
It's so
What happened to the bug? What happens if you? It's still over there. Ow!
cool.
It's still
That was
right,
just one drop.
it's right there.
One crystal.
Imagine.
Look at it extending from the bottom.
Oh, that one's racing. It's racing. Look, that one's Jeremy. He got it.
Yeah, I get there first.
Watch it race.
I want to see my nail. I want my nail to be in the picture.
Oh my gosh, Elijah, this is giving me goosebumps.
It does look kind of weird.
This is so cool. Is this real? They look like feathers.
Can we touch it?
Oh my god.
Are we gonna
No,
pull it?
wait till it's all crystallized.
You would touch it either way, but
I
I
would.
touch radioactive things. Oh my gosh, poor Austin.
You can't see like that.
He's
Rena,
in
stop.
Korea. He's having more fun.
Pretty amazing, huh? Now, what might that have to do with anything in worship, this supersaturated solution? Well, kids and parents and others, I just invite you to kind of keep that supersaturated solution in the back of your mind, and maybe you'll figure out a reason why we played that in this particular morning's service for the parable that you'll be hearing, right now.
So the ancient testimony for this morning comes from the book of Matthew. It's the later part, and Jesus has already gone to Jerusalem. So from Matthew 24. As Jesus came out of the temple and was going away, his disciples came to point out to him the buildings of the temple. Then he asked them, "You see all these, do you not? Truly, I tell you, not one stone will be left here upon another. All will be thrown down." When he was sitting on the Mount of Olives, the disciples came to him privately, saying, "Tell us, when will this be? And what will be the sign of your coming and the end of the age?" Jesus answered them, "Beware that no one leads you astray. For many will come in my name, saying, 'I am the Messiah,' and they will lead many astray. And you will hear of wars and rumors of wars. See that you are not alarmed, for this must take place, but the end is not yet. For nation will rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom, and there will be famines and earthquakes in various places. All this is but the beginning of the birth pangs. Then they will hand you over to be tortured and will put you to death, and you will be hated by all nations because of my name. Then many will fall away, and they will betray one another and hate one another. And many false prophets will arise and lead many astray. And because of the increase in lawlessness, the love of many will grow cold. But the one who endures to the end will be saved. And this good news of the kingdom will be proclaimed throughout the world as a testimony to all the nations, and then the end will come. And when you see the desolating sacrilege standing in the holy place, as was spoken by the prophet Daniel, let the reader understand. Then those in Judea must flee to the mountains. The one on the housetop must not go down to take what is in the house. The one in the field must not turn back to get a coat. Woe to those who are pregnant and to those who are nursing infants in those days. Pray that your flight may not be in winter or on a Sabbath. For at that time there will be great suffering, such as has not been from the beginning of the world until now, no, and never will be. And if those days had not been cut short, no one would be saved. But for the sake of the elect, those days will be cut short. Then if anyone says to you, look, here is the Messiah, or there he is, do not believe it. For false messiahs and false prophets will appear and produce great signs and omens to lead astray, if possible, even the elect. Take note, I have told you beforehand. So if they say to you, look, he is in the wilderness, do not go out. If they say, look, he is in the inner rooms, do not believe it. For as the lightning comes from the east and flashes as far as the west, so will be the coming of the Son of Man. Wherever the corpse is, the vultures will gather. Immediately after the suffering of those days, the sun will be darkened, and the moon will not give its light. The stars will fall from heaven, and the powers of heaven will be shaken. Then the sign of the Son of Man will appear in heaven, and then all the tribes of the earth will mourn, and they will see the Son of Man coming in the clouds of heaven with power and great glory. And he will send down his angels with a loud trumpet call, and they will gather his elect from the four winds, and from one end of heaven to the other. From the fig tree, learn its lesson. As soon as its branch becomes tender and puts forth its leaves, you know that summer is near. So also, when you see all these things, you will know that he is near at the very gates. That's the end of the reading for this morning.
Does everybody want to join in? Thanks be to God.
Thanks be to God, yeah.
You all looked very uncomfortable during that reading. Why would that be? What makes you uncomfortable about that passage? Anybody, feel free to unmute yourself. What does this passage call to mind that made you so uncomfortable? Anybody, or maybe you weren't. Maybe I was misinterpreting. Well, a lot of people, when they hear this passage, they think about, end times and all these, calls throughout every age. It seems like somebody said, "Oh, it's the end of the world here. Jesus is coming back. And there's be people left behind and so forth." That's what we think of when we hear this passage and this parable about the fig tree here. But I'm going to invite you to see this in a little different way and start out with another video, though, to help us. Some of you may have seen this before. I'm going to ask you, how many times do you see a basketball being passed between the people in white shirts? Now, if you've seen this before, I'm going to ask you to sit on your hands here, but let's take a look at this.
Count how many times the players wearing white pass the ball.
Okay. How many times do you see them pass the ball? 9, 10, I see. Okay, well, let's find out what the answer is, and maybe there's a surprise for those of you who have not seen this thing before.
The correct answer is 16 passes. Did you spot the gorilla? For people who haven't seen or heard about a video like this before, about half miss the gorilla. If you knew about the gorilla, you probably saw it. But did you notice the curtain changing color or the player on the black team leaving the game?
No.
Let's rewind and watch it again. Here comes the gorilla, and there goes a player, and the curtain is changing from red to gold.
What?
When you're looking for a gorilla, you often miss other unexpected events.
And such is the case with interpreting parables too, and some of what Jesus has to say in the Gospels. We're coming 2,000 years after Jesus. We are so programmed by our history to hear certain words of Jesus and we hear those things, and they program us to think about end times and left behind and apocalyptic scenarios and so forth. We're so busy looking for those things. It's like looking for the people passing the ball, but we miss the gorilla that has just passed by. When we look at the history, the early history of that era, there was a huge gorilla that passed by when you look at the history that we just don't notice, because oftentimes we're so focused on the apocalyptic stuff, and we're maybe not as familiar with early history as, well, certainly the ancients who read the Gospels would have been. So does anybody have, well, I'm sure a lot of you know what happened in 70 CE in Israel. Does anybody know of a big gorilla-like event that happened then? Anybody?
The temple was destroyed in Jerusalem.
Yes, absolutely. The temple was destroyed in Jerusalem. In Jesus' day, a lot of Jesus' teachings were very peacemaking oriented, and part of this because he was really part of a movement that was standing counter to another movement within Judaism called zealotry, the Zealot movement. Now, there is a book by Reza Aslan, who I respect very highly, that insists that makes the claim that Jesus was a zealot. That is absolutely a misreading, I believe, of Jesus. He was actually while Aslan creates a great picture of the context of first century Israel, I think he misses the message of Jesus pretty profoundly, that Jesus had a very anti-zealot message. And he was prescient enough to know, he could see that all the zealots were calling for violence against Rome. They were anticipating a Messiah who would come, who would lead them into a violent revolt against Rome and reestablish Israel as a free people. So there was a lot of talk about messiahs in Jesus' day, but not a Messiah like Jesus, but a Messiah that would be a military leader. So that was the Zealot movement, and a lot of rabbis were very much in line with the Zealots. There was a further movement within zealotry called Sicarii, which means men of the dagger. They were people actually who weren't just simply about killing Romans. They were going to kill Jews who were opposed to the Zealots, opposed to the movement to overthrow the Roman Empire. Well, push comes to shove, these movements grow, and there are more and more armed revolts against Rome. And in 70 CE, Rome finally says enough of this, and they send soldiers down and absolutely decimate not only the temple, but all of Jerusalem. In fact, to this day, you can see in Jerusalem stones that were still left from them toppling those walls that existed in 70 CE. And if you go to Rome, you can see this, which is the Arch of Titus, who was the Caesar at the time. This is a depiction of the sack of Jerusalem and the carting off of the precious holy elements from the temple itself. And we read about this kind of beastly, guerrilla-like event. We know a lot about it through an early first century Jewish historian named Flavius Josephus, who himself actually was a zealot at first. And he escaped from Jerusalem, and they caught up with him, though. And he was a pretty clever man, though, very intelligent. And when they caught him, he knew he and his partner, they were dead. They were dead. But he hatches a plan, and he goes into what appears to be an ecstatic state, like he's receiving divine revelation, and he says, "Oh my gosh, soldiers, we were wrong. The Messiah was not this person we were following. It was the Messiah is Caesar himself." And they're like, "What?" They report this to Caesar, who was part of that, the army, Titus. And Titus is kind of impressed by that, a Jewish person saying, "Oh, you're the Messiah," And so he took him into his court. And anyway, that's how Josephus survived in order to then write the history of that era. But when we hear Jesus talk about this destruction and when you see people coming, run, flee, and wars and rumors of wars and all kinds of stuff happening. He's talking about this coming thing. He's not talking about the apocalypse. The big gorilla in the room is what would come not too long after Jesus, existed, which was the fall of Rome. I think Jesus, a lot of his preaching is trying to get people to do love enemies, pray for those who persecute them, that kind of thing, in order to keep what was going to happen from happening, if at all possible. And so, of course, in later years, like Matthew's gospel, scholars believe was written, a full 40 years after Jesus even was there. So if you go back and read that passage again, you'll see some things that don't fit what I've just said. I'm coming down from the clouds and so forth. But there's just a lot of evidence to suggest that his sayings, even in that era, especially before there was a destruction of the temple, were kind of confused. Then people didn't know exactly what he was talking about. So some interpret them to be end times when he's really talking about not end times, but rather this cataclysmic event that could be avoided. But it does make me wonder, though. So I think that that whole apocalyptic theology, that this end times stuff was one of the biggest mistakes Christianity ever made. It was a fundamental misinterpretation. And when we think about second coming, that when even Jesus himself says, "I'll come again," well, there was a second coming. In fact, there was a third coming too. Second coming, resurrection. Right? Third coming, Pentecost. How many comings do we have of Jesus? Probably he's appeared to you in your life in various forms. How many comings do we need? We don't need to look for some cataclysmic second coming and Jesus downloaded from the heavens and ushering in some apocalyptic scenario. But I do wonder, Paul, the Apostle Paul, speaks about how we all see through a glass darkly. He says in the book of Romans, we all look through a glass darkly. And that word darkly in Greek is anagmati. Now there's an English word that sounds like anagmati, right? It's enigma. What is an enigma? Well, enigma means, it's a mystery, it's puzzling, a riddle, it's ambiguous, it's difficult to understand and interpret. Paul says when we look out at life, when we even try to think about God or what's up in the world, we see things, and we might see things that are real, but we see them through a glass darkly. So even if we're in touch with something that's real about God or life or what reality is, it's always corrupted in some way. It's always kind of shaded in some way. So you can't take any of our projections about what reality is or what the future even is literally. Even if it's accurate to a certain degree, it's always corrupted. And I do wonder if, given that all three Abrahamic faiths, of the leading Abrahamic faiths, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, all three throughout the centuries, despite being proven wrong in every area about either the Messiah is coming in Judaism or the second coming of the Messiah is coming, that is, Christianity espouses this, and also Islam. Islam is looking for the second coming of Jesus. That's a really important tenet in Islam, that Jesus is coming again. Every era, people have said, hey, he's coming, or the Messiah is coming in Judaism, and they've always been proven wrong, and yet that belief persists for some reason. And could this be just be because they're all deluded, and we just kind of keep falling into doing the same thing over and over again, and whether we're proved right or not? Or could there be some form of intuition that may not be exactly what either Judaism or Christianity or Islam expects, but could there be some kernel in that? Something suggestive that why they keep looking for something in the future? I won't have the answer to that by the end of worship, but I invite you to think about that as we enjoy and take in our anthem.
Our modern testimony this week comes from the group REM, which reminds us it's the end of the world as we know it. It's the end of the world as we know it. It's the end of the world as we know it. And I feel fine.
Amen. Thank you. So in 2019, I led a group from my congregation in Omaha to Israel and Jordan Israel-Palestine in Jordan, I should say. And one of those people who joined me on that journey was my eldest daughter, Ariana. It was a great, great privilege to have her along on the trip and experience the Holy Land, which is both holy and unholy in these days. Together. It was a fabulous journey. And of course, one of the highlights is when you go to see the places that Jesus himself would have, where he would have been and where he would have stood and where he would have preached. And one of those places is a place in modern day called Banias or Panias earlier. We know it in the Bible as Caesarea Philippi. It's where Jesus and the disciples kind of went off to. Herod is after him. Jesus is kind of staying one step ahead of the law. Oftentimes, if you actually look at his movements around Israel, if you read the Gospels very carefully, you notice that he's always kind of strategically crossing administrative districts. So just when the law is after him, he crosses into a new district where the law can't follow him, and it's a new jurisdiction. And this is one of those times. And Caesarea Philippi is just crossing a boundary into a new jurisdiction. He's got some breathing room, and it's a very sacred, holy, beautiful. From ancient times, it was considered a very sacred place. Panias is after the god Pan, and it was believed that there were some holiness associated with this cave, from which the river literally flows out of the mouth of the cave. You can imagine being an ancient person seeing the site and like, wow. This must be a very holy place. And it's in Caesarea Philippi or Panias or Banias, where Jesus the Gospels say he asked the disciples, "Who do you say that I am?" And they come up with different people's different ideas. Some people say you are Elijah. Some people say you're this. But he then says, "But who do you say that I am?" And Peter, is the one who says, "I believe you are the Messiah, the Christ." And we kind of read that, and it kind of comes trippingly off the tongue, like, oh, okay, yeah, of course, we looking back, we believe that, okay, he was the Messiah as Christians. But imagine being Peter, or any of those disciples at those days. It would be a lot different experience, like a human being that's standing before you, who you've seen go out into the bushes and go to the bathroom, you've seen burp and fart and do all those things, like just like a human being does, and then you may consider this person to be a very wise person. You may think that they're somebody worth following, but then when push comes to shove, is this person the Messiah of Judaism, the one who so many zealots, have said would come and help, them throw off the Roman, chains and be free? Where Jesus is talking about peacemaking, peace waging. How much guts would it take to say you were the one? You. Well, we decided to try a little experiment on that, and I invited Ariana to get a little uncomfortable and the crowd. And she went around to each member of the people who had come on the trip with me, and she stood before them and said to them, each individually, "Who do you say that I am?" And they were to answer, "You are the Messiah, the Christ." Just to try that on, how that would feel to actually look another human being in the eyes and make that claim. And it really shook people up. It's like, wow, Peter, whoa. But also there was this amazing sense of holiness that really was palpable by the time the whole group had finished. They each had their opportunity to find within themselves something that could name such a thing. It does make me wonder, if we were to find Jesus again in our world, if Jesus were re-entering. I'm not looking for any Jesus coming down from the clouds personally, but it's an interesting question. If a Messiah-like figure came in our broken world, what would this person be like? And would he be male, female, non-binary, what have you? But we used that time at Caesarea Philippi to also talk about the difference between a prophetic annunciation and a messianic annunciation. There's a difference between the two if you look at in the Bible. A prophetic annunciation is kind of like, the pattern would be Jeremiah, like There's something wrong going on deeply, like in Israel in Jeremiah's day. The poor were being exploited, the widows, the orphans, the classic trinity, the poor, the widow, and the orphan. They were being abused, they were being oppressed, they were being taken advantage of, and very few people were caring for them, which is always the biblical standard about the health of a society, how you treat the most vulnerable in society, and they were certainly not treated well. And Jeremiah, and kind of along with that, there was all kinds of hubris about, we're number one, our nation's number one, Israel first kind of hubris. And at the time they were being ruled by the Assyrians and the Babylonians, and they thought, Israel first, we could take them on, we could throw off because God's obviously on our side, even though they weren't doing anything shape or form close to what God wanted them to do, right? And so Jeremiah stands up and he says, hey, this is wrong. Look out, folks, because if we don't get our way, if we don't change our ways, there's some really bad stuff coming. And, of course, Jeremiah interprets this as, God's bringing it upon them. And we could argue about whether God did that or not, but clearly they brought it upon themselves. In their hubris, they decided to throw off the yoke of the Assyrians and the Babylonians, and the Babylonians didn't like that particularly much. And, compared to Israel compared to the Babylonians, like New Jersey compared to the United States. I mean, that's, if New Jersey wanted to succeed from the Union, the United States would have the way, right? They came down, and that's when you had the first destruction of the temple. Now, that's a prophetic annunciation where the prophet stands up, utters the word of the Lord, and basically nobody pays attention until after the bad stuff happens. And then people say, oh, that was that crazy guy who said that bad stuff was going to happen unless we change. That was a prophet. That wasn't just an ordinary person. They pay attention. So suddenly now Jeremiah is a prophet. And that happens over and over again in the Bible. That's a prophetic annunciation where the prophet stands up, people don't pay attention, then what the prophet says comes true, then suddenly he's a prophet. But a messianic annunciation is a bit different. A messianic annunciation is actually capable of changing the tide, of actually shaping the course of history away from the bad stuff that's going to happen, at least in part. We know obviously that Jesus, reflecting a messianic annunciation, he preaches about bad stuff happening. Not everyone listened, and bad stuff happened, and yet enough people paid attention to that preaching that they kind of calved off then, and there was a remnant that really then remained and grew and was increasingly committed to nonviolence, even though they were being persecuted even harder and harder and harder and harder. And it was that group of people who refused to hate their enemies, who refused to fight the Romans, who ended up taking over the Roman Empire within 4 centuries in completely nonviolent, peaceful ways, right? So it did, obviously we look back and we realize Jesus did shape the course of human history. He wasn't just simply a prophet where nobody pays attention to and then goes away, but rather shaped the course of human history. But we put a lot of attention, when we talk about messiahs, on a single person, Jesus. He's the Messiah, and that's what a Messiah does. They shape human history. But I think there's a little more to it that we ought to pay attention to. It's not just about a messianic annunciation is never about the Messiah themselves. In fact, that's one of the ways that's one of the tests you could always tell of false messiahs. It's all about me. I'm the Messiah. I'm the one. Hey, follow me. And then they always go, that always goes badly the last 2,000 years, right? That's always gone badly. Or as one of my Jewish rabbi friends says, whenever there's been a false Messiah, Jews always die. And this way they don't like people calling me up saying, hey, I'm the Messiah, because Jews always die, when that happens. No, there's more to a messianic annunciation than simply a person arising. Once more, a video will help us understand a bit more about this subject. This is actually some footage from the Sasquatch Music Festival in the Columbia River Gorge in 2009, but some commentary about it.
If you've learned a lot about leadership and making a movement, then let's watch a movement happen start to finish in under 3 minutes and dissect some lessons. First, of course, a leader needs the guts to stand alone and look ridiculous. But what he's doing is so simple, it's almost instructional. This is key. You must be easy to follow. Now here comes the first follower with a crucial role. He publicly shows everyone else how to follow. Notice how the leader embraces him as an equal. So it's not about the leader anymore. It's about them, plural. Notice how he's calling to his friends to join in. See, it takes guts to be a first follower. You stand out and you brave ridicule yourself. Being a first follower is an underappreciated form of leadership. The first follower transforms a lone nut into a leader. If the leader is the flint, the first follower is the spark that really makes the fire. Now here's the second follower. This is a turning point. It's proof the first has done well. Now it's not a lone nut and it's not two nuts. 3 is a crowd and a crowd is news. A movement must be public. Make sure outsiders see more than just the leader. Everyone needs to see the followers because new followers emulate followers, not the leader. Now here come 2 more people, then 3 more immediately. Now we've got momentum. This is the tipping point and now we have a movement. As more people jump in, it's no longer risky. If they were on the fence before, there's no reason not to join in now. They won't stand out, they won't be ridiculed, and they will be part of the in crowd if they hurry. And over the next minute you'll see the rest who prefer to stay part of the crowd, because eventually they'd be ridiculed for not joining. And ladies and gentlemen, that is how a movement is made. So let's recap what we've learned. If you are a version of the shirtless dancing guy, all alone, remember the importance of nurturing your first few followers as equals, making everything clearly about the movement, not you. Be public, be easy to follow. But the biggest lesson here, did you catch it? Leadership is overglorified. Yes, it started with the shirtless guy, and he'll get all the credit, but you saw what really happened. It was the first follower that transformed a lone nut into a leader. There's no movement without the first follower. See, we're told that we all need to be leaders, but that would be really ineffective. The best way to make a movement, if you really care, is to courageously follow and show others how to follow. When you find a lone nut doing something great, have the guts to be the first person to stand up and join in.
So by now, perhaps you're drawing some parallels, or if you haven't, I'm going to help you draw a parallel, or invite you to draw a parallel between that, what you just saw, and that super saturated solution video we saw earlier. Can you see any connections between that video and the super saturated solution? Anybody want to offer your take on what might connect those? Or how what you see is happening is acting like a super saturated solution? Or what does this have to do with messiahs? Or have I completely lost you?
It only took one crystal to make the whole thing go.
Yeah, right. Yeah, we focus on that one person, like the crystal person, yet it's not just about that person. It's providing the person. Yeah, the person provides the pattern, and the crowd is already, they're wanting that. I mean, think about the people at that music festival. They want to get up and groove. They're feeling the music. They're feeling it, but just one guy standing, that's a little bit odd, but he's showing them. He's like, oh, I want to do that, but I'm just afraid. And the next person gives them permission to overcome their fears of being weird, and get out. And pretty soon, the whole floodgate goes and everybody wants to do that. We certainly have examples in our history of people who have made huge waves like that, but we focus on the person and we forget about the context in which the person stood. Take, for instance, Gandhi. We focus on Gandhi and the way he led to the India, freeing their shackles of Great Britain. And Gandhi yet was the one who provided the pattern for the people. Because there's a lot of people resonating with what Gandhi was about. When Gandhi said, when I despair, I remember that all through history, the way of truth and love have always won. The way of truth and love have always won. There have been tyrants and murderers, and for a time they can even seem invincible. But in the end, they always fail. And deep down, people knew that. And he named it, and he embodied it, and people followed. And then we give him the credit. And yet he simply pulled together what so many millions of people were already feeling. Same thing with Martin Luther King. You know, Martin Luther King was not the one who created the movement for racial justice. There were millions of people, or certainly hundreds of thousands, resonating already on his frequency. You know, and then when he offered his words, it acted like that crystal. Here's just one of those. You know, young ladies and gentlemen, the Lord does not ask you to solve the great problems of the world. He does not ask you to unravel the enigmatic mysteries of life. Brothers and sisters, this is all you have to do. You have to let your light shine. Don't be a part of the darkness. Let your light shine. Of course, that light looked a lot like that light that Jesus spoke of when he himself revealed that pattern that is deeply ingrained in each of us, where our souls want to go, but we always feel afraid. And when push comes to shove, we just lack the courage to get there. Especially in the Sermon on the Mount, that pattern is revealed. But I say to you that listen, love your enemies, do good to those who hate you, bless those who curse you, pray for those who abuse you. If anyone strikes you on the cheek, offer the other also. And from anyone who takes away your coat, do not withhold even your shirt. Give to everyone who begs from you, and if anyone takes away your goods, do not ask for them again. Do to others what you would have them do to you. In a time when humanity is facing the greatest threat to its existence that it's ever faced, between the threat of climate change, the threat of runaway climate change, the threat of nuclear annihilation, or threat of some new scientific discovery that goes a bit out of our hands. We've never been under such threat in our world, and so much need to do the Jesus thing, to love our enemies, to do good to those who hate us. Because now, while humanity throughout the ages could afford to, when push came to shove, to still kill their enemies, now that we've democratized the instruments of mass destruction, can we really afford to do this? Or now that we need to get about the job of climate change, can we really afford to be fighting and bickering across political lines right now? We have to be able to find that pattern which is deepest in our souls. I believe very deeply that you and I know three things at the soul level, that if you really still yourself down, when you really quiet the static, our souls, your soul, my soul, knows three things. First, that there really is a God. That there is a God. There's something holy afoot all around us. Second, that this holiness, this divine, this sacrality is not only aware of us, but more aware of us than we're aware of us. Haven't you ever sensed that? Some of those times when you're maybe on a walk in the woods, or you're deep in meditation, or wherever you are, and an insight comes that just seems to come from out of nowhere, and yet is so wise and so knowing about you and your situation that it just like, it floors you. It's like, whatever this came from knows me more better than I know me. And when that comes, there's also the third piece, that because of this awareness, and despite the awareness, this consciousness, the sacred something, loves us beyond our wildest imagination. And we know this because when these insights come, there's always love with it. No matter what we've done or left undone, there's always love. Even if it's calling us to change behaviors in radical ways, there's always this wild, deep, groaning, yearning love behind it. We know at a soul level that we are loved beyond our wildest imaginations. And if we're ever to accept that for ourselves, really accept it, we also have to acknowledge that our neighbor is also loved beyond their wildest imagination. And even our enemies are loved beyond their wildest imagination and ours. And this is why the Martin Luther King thing works. This is why the Gandhi thing works. This is why the Jesus thing works. Because when there's enough pressure in society where people yearning to enact that crazy form of love where you would even love your enemies, there's enough people doing it, it acts like that supersaturated solution. You just need those models, whether it be a person, a church, a group of individuals, a disciple band, whatever there is that displays that model and finds those who are already resonating in that future have the capability to change things, perhaps even change the world. Well, I don't know about changing the world, if we'll ever get around to changing the world, but could our community of faith, First Congregational United Church of Christ, be a bit like that shirtless dancing guy or gal or non-binary person? Could we, there's the way that we move in society, you show that crazy form of love more and more to the Portland community? Or could we simply be like the second person, the follower, who simply says, we've seen the pattern already. We've seen it in Jesus. We've seen it in Gandhi. We've seen it in Martin Luther King. We've seen it in so many. We're following that form of being in the world. Or could we even just be the third person? Say, we've seen examples of this. We've seen communities get around this. We're going to be like this. And maybe we won't change the world, but maybe we could help change Portland and our community. And if we don't change Portland, the Portland community, perhaps we just change ourselves. We change First Congregational United Church of Christ to reflect more and more the image and likeness of God that we are created to be. Amen.
There's a song in every silence, seeking word and melody. There's the dawn for every darkness, bringing hope to you and me. From the past will come the future, what it holds a mystery, unrevealed until this season, something God alone can see.
Holy God, we give you thanks this morning for those who have labored in the vineyards in so many ways, many of them not ordained or not recognized in any particular way. And then some like Frank Baldwin, and I understand also Bill Green, who's been in the ministry now 60 years, have labored in this particular way. We give you thanks for all who have labored in the labor of love, organizing itself in this world, whether ordained or not. Hear our prayers.
There's a song in every silence, seeking word and melody.
Holy God, as we face the largest threats to human existence that humanity has ever faced, we strongly suspect that because you are real and because you are more aware of us than we're aware of us, and because you love us beyond our wildest imagination without any exceptions, that you're not simply sitting up in the heavens someplace saying, let me know how that goes for you, but that you are active in this world, helping us, perhaps even in a messianic kind of way, to turn the tides of history, to do what history does not expect, to face this threat and face it down in the name of love. Holy God, whether there is one person arises or millions and millions of them, let us at least be part of that crowd. Let us be part of that crystallization of your love and compassion for the world. Hear our prayers.
There's a song in every song.
God, we realize that it's not simply humanity that's under a threat, but down on the level closer to the ground, there are people who are in our spheres very close to us who face physical threats, spiritual or mental threats. We hold these people in our hearts too and lift them up to you as we unmute ourselves and offer these names. We ask that you not only hear our prayers, but the congregation itself, that we may be joined with you in a spirit of love and compassion for these people.
Bruce and Sean. Carl and Devin and Lakai and Jaden.
Dan Vaughn.
Dan and Jim.
Holy God, for those we have named and those who have been left unnamed but yet reside in our hearts, we lift up our prayers and pray as we pray in the name of the one who taught us to pray, saying, Our Father, Mother, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our debts as we forgive our debtors. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. Thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory forever. Amen. I invite you at some point also look at the chat where other names were offered in our chat as well. Well, every week after we reflect on the many ways that God has given light and life to us, we also reflect on the ways we can give life and light to the world in response to what we've received. And we think about three different ways. One is through those material possessions that we have, where perhaps would be more appreciated and better used in the hands of others. We look at our material belongings and where they might be routed to help a person in need. When we get back together again physically, I would love to actually bring those items to the church every week and have special calls for those things to benefit certain organizations. But for now, we simply look at our own personal lives and possessions and where we can route those. We also consider our financial resources that we've been blessed with and how they may be used to grow the realm of love on earth through the work of First Congregational United Church of Christ and through other means that we're directed to by the Spirit. And finally, we think about the time and talent we've been given. We don't think of ourselves as being given much talent, but we have been, or much time, but we actually have more than enough, and how we can best use those to the glory of God, but more specifically to the glory of God's work with humanity and creating a community of love. And in this regard, there are a few things that Phil Owen will be reminding us of, that ways we can use our time and talents.
Yes, there's a lot in the current Newsweek, this week newsletter about the church and the broader community. So I'll lift up just a few. One is June is Pride Month. So it's appropriate to be thinking about our LGBTQ plus friends, relatives, neighbors. And I believe next week we'll see a little more about that. The Benvenidos quilting group will be meeting on Monday, every Monday, sewing quilts for children at the borders. All are invited, and you don't have to be a sewing machine operator to help. The worship team If you are interested or concerned or have questions about the worship team, want to find out more about what it does and how it works, respond to this announcement in the newsletter, and we'll hook you up with that. Today's walk will begin at 455 Southeast Spokane Street around the Oaks Bottom neighborhood. We'll be meeting at 2 o'clock. The church council will be meeting on Tuesday. It's a Zoom meeting, and all members are invited to attend. And also, along with that, 2 more Zoom meetings about the next stages in our life together as a church. The first one today after worship, and the next one on June 23rd. These will be important to prepare for the congregational meeting on June 27th, and more details will be coming soon. So check out the Newsweek, This Week newsletter for all the details, all the connections, and other things of interest. Thank you.
Praise God from all blessings flow. Praise God all regions near below. Praise God all lovely daughters and sons. Praise God the child and
Now, my friends, may the Spirit, the Holy Spirit of the living God, made known to us as Christians most fully in Jesus Christ our Lord, go before you to show you the way, go above you to watch over you, go behind you to push into those places you may not necessarily go yourself, go beneath you to uphold you and uplift you, go beside you to be your strong and constant companion, and dwell within you to remind you that you are surely not alone on life's journey. You are loved, loved beyond your wildest imagination. May the fire of God's blessing burn brightly upon you and within you and through you now and always. Amen.